Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to the Forgotten Realms. Andreas, either Sleipnitz or Sleipnitz, may well be a cross between the two. I may have completely mangled your family name, and for that I apologise. Asked me to do another Gentleman's Guide to the Forgotten Realms, or a series of them, and depending on my enthusiasm, I may well do more than one. But this video is on deities of the Forgotten Realms. A while back I did a video on Ilmater and Merkel, two of my favourite deities in the Forgotten Realms campaign setting. And I thought I'd cover another two that I am a particular fan of that don't really get much in the way of play from players or GMs. Those two being Chauntea, or the Earth Mother, or Grain Mother, or Earth Goddess, otherwise known as, let's see, we also have the Golden Goddess, she who shapes all, and Moander, the Lord of Rot, the corrupt Earth, basically. You have a diametric opposite couple of deities here. You have a neutral good, if I recall, deity of life, bounty, growth, and power of Elysium, greater power. According to Faiths and Pantheons of 3rd edition, if I recall, the actual most powerful single major deity in the Forgotten Realms campaign setting. And by stats alone, if that counts for anything when you're talking about gods. And you have Moander, who is a god of corruption, of rot, of everything unholy and disastrous, down to the point of demi-power and ultimately dead god. But of course there were times when the two coexisted, and there aren't many gods as ancient and primordial as Moander, whose portfolio was eventually usurped by Find a Wyvern Spur, who turns the rot and corruption into change and cyclical. From death comes regrowth and rebirth and so on. Now, why focus on these two? Well, Chauntea is often seen as a goddess of farmers, of gardeners, of the sorts of people that would stay at home and keep the army fed. And to a degree that's true, but given that she is probably the most widely worshipped goddess of the realms, I wouldn't say it's entirely true. Bear in mind that everyone in the realms is aware that there is more than one god. It doesn't matter if you have a favoured deity or not. You are aware that there is an entire pantheon. No one is so focused that they think that there's only one god above them. And therefore, even the evil people of Zentil Keep, even the evildoers of Fae, still pray to Chauntea because everyone needs feeding. Everyone needs their lands to grow. Everyone prays for a good harvest. And the Harvest Mother, and indeed many of her clergy are referred to as Harvest Mothers and Harvest Fathers, are some of the most important people in the realms who go without notice. I think that's quite an interesting thing. How would an adventuring party made up of adventurers dedicated to Chauntea, or even part of them dedicated to Chauntea, be seen? Well, again, she's not really a deity that seems to produce characters, players creating characters. You always go for Sylvanus if you want a druid, or Maileki if you want a ranger. You know, you go for something a bit more combat, a bit more polarised, I suppose, because it seems more interesting than the god of growth and life and fertility and so on. But I think that in history we can see that many of the gods of fertility are the ones who share worship as gods of war, and you make sacrifices to gods of fertility. You find that they are, of course, the most important things in the world. And so having a fighter dedicated to Chauntea, what's the kind of thing that they would be doing? Well, bear in mind that Chauntea is all about the home, the hearth, the family, and so on. Anyone who is seeking to protect their family is likely to be paying lip service to Chauntea to keep them live and healthy. Anyone who is trying to protect a home or land is likely to be saying prayers to Chauntea as well, because you don't want it raised in your absence. You don't want the weather to turn foul. You don't want the earth to turn. Anyone who is blessing the earth, any cleric, any priest, any wizard who is performing a spell that may otherwise blast the earth or somehow despoil it for a brief amount of time is likely to make prayers to placate Chauntea, to just thank her, to although she is probably one of the most bountiful and beautiful and wondrous of goddesses, you are still going to you're going to try and sprinkle some seeds, you're going to water the earth, you're going to do something like bury your refuse before you take up your tent and march on the battle, because this is a god you always want on your side. And therefore I could see a lot of characters, a lot of lowborn characters and highborn both, to be honest, but more lowborn, having Chauntea as a favoured deity, because she's an easy deity with whom you can relate. She stands for things that everyone believes in and everyone needs. Now, the Church of Shanthi is quite an interesting one because it is quite divided. You have urban Chaunteans and you have the more rural ones. She has favoured priests among druids as well as clerics. The clerics often sticking to the more urban environs surrounded by fields and farmlands and whatnot, and the druids, of course, working in the forests, the swamps, the glades, and the like. And both of them seem to see the other branch as false. And I think that provides an interesting little dichotomy there, that in this most solid of churches, most solid of temples, and I believe one of their largest is in Golden Fields to the northeast of Waterdeep, off the top of my head. And it's a very powerful complex, an incredibly powerful tract of land there that no one is going to dare take on, because that is the breadbasket of Waterdeep, essentially. Or anyone who does dare take it on is going to meet an awful lot of resistance from, I imagine, Skullport as well as Waterdeep. All that food goes somewhere, and Skullport will get fed from somewhere. Despite that great power base, they are still fighting among themselves for which one is the true servant. The urban clerics often seeing the druids as a bit backwards, saying, well, this is clearly the way that we are meant to grow. This is what Chauntea is showing us. And the druids saying, but we still need to preserve the old ways. In the Moonshae Isles, they still worship a more animistic form of Chauntea, the Earth Mother. They believe, they are one of very few cultures that believes in, primarily worships only about one of three gods, I think. Chauntea, Talos and Baal were the big three around the first edition of Forgotten Realms, as I remember it. But they believe that the Moonshae Isles are her body, and that's an interesting idea. Chauntea is, much like Saloon is the moon, Chauntea is Faerun, is Abir Toriel. It is her body that you dig into. It is her body that you violate with your dungeons. It is her body that you bless whenever you consecrate the earth. And so I think that you could play a very, very interesting character worshipping a goddess like that, especially given that she's a benevolent goddess. The kinds of riches that you would reap through worshipping a goddess like that faithfully in a setting like the Forgotten Realms, and the good favour that you would earn with people that you met by being recognised as a follower of Chauntea, well, that is unparalleled, I would say, because there are very few faiths that are going to piss off the majority of Faerun. If you walk into a village and you've got the symbol of Torm on your chest, you're making a very bold statement. If you've got a symbol of Bane on your chest, you're probably making an even bolder one. If you've got a symbol of Chauntea on your chest, people are likely to favour you because you are a follower of the goddess that feeds everyone. I think that's a very, very interesting route to go down. You could potentially play a mercenary character in that regard, as in morally so. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have Moander. Moander is a god that I've used in many games, although I've never played in a game where another DM has used Moander. And in a way, I think it's because his church is somewhat inscrutable. He's a little like the Gornador of First Edition, although Gornador was around then as well, but had less focus put on him. If you're familiar with the Azure Bonds novels, the, let's think, what were they called? The Alias trilogy, maybe? By Jeff Grubb and Kate Novak, if I recall. they were some of the first Forgotten Realms novels and dealt quite heavily with the Church of Moander and really grabbed my attention back then. Moander was a faith still in prominence around the time of Netheril, and although even then he was never a great deity, or it was never a great deity, this deity, which most often appeared as a colossal mound of rotten feculence, was all about corruption, but not just corruption of the earth, and I think this is a route you can take Moander that not many people do. He's also about the corruption of people. His followers plant these little seeds in people's ears that actually hollow them out and make them become seedlings of Moander. Essentially, they become puppets of the god and the high priests of the god. Now, you don't necessarily need that to corrupt someone on behalf of Moander. You can corrupt them through atrophy, through stagnation. This is what Moander is largely about. He isn't about the Loviatar or Lovitar strike of pain constantly, the decadent corruption, although he certainly can be. He isn't about necessarily poisoning or disease like Talona, although again he certainly can be. He is about stagnation. His avatar is an excellent emblem of this, given that it is strongest in warm, wet environments. It will just keep growing and growing until I think it's about 100 foot across, maybe? I may even be underselling that. But if it gets exposed to cold weapons, much like a mould, it will take double damage. It is a thing that is basically a massive compost heap and is unlikely to ever take a humanoid-like shape, although occasionally its avatar is a colossal great head trailing rotten weeds and so on. Its symbol, Chauntea's symbol, I believe, is a rose on a gold disc. I'm going to actually look that up. Budding flowers encircled by a sunburst or sheaf of golden wheat on a green field. So close. I think I mixed that with Lathander a bit there. Moander's is a male hand with a female mouth with fangs in it, in the palm. It is a real layered symbol there, you know, of ancient evil. It is male, it is female, it is anger, it is consumption. And going back to the atrophy angle, if you don't want to necessarily just put a load of druids in a game that are trying to spread rot and generally poison the earth, because that's a fairly typical way of using Moander, have the corrupt hierarchy worshipping Moander because they are slothful, because Moander encourages inaction, because the seeds of Moander grow where people just don't pay any attention. And the worshippers of Moander are immune to all disease and poison, so they can just languidly lay there on their in their chairs, in their beds, on their futons, while their servants are being torn to pieces or dying of all manner of wasting disease, because the leaders just can't be bothered. The ultimate decadent nobility isn't the one that tries to think of a new way of subjugating their people, although that's certainly a very bad thing. See Saddam Hussein for details, who isn't a Forgotten Realms character, unfortunately. Would have saved a lot of lives if that was all he was. The fact with Moander is he's not necessarily going to encourage that. He encourages human sacrifice, he encourages the sacrifice of holy and pure creatures like such as unicorns and so on, especially if you can plant a seed on one of these creatures and hollow it out and then get it to feed itself to the great sort of earthen pyramid or rotten pyramid of Moander somewhere in Ulash, which, interestingly, the red plumes of Hillsfar allow to exist there. They allow the priesthood of Moander to mill around that area because they use a great mouth of Moander, a huge pit, as a midden. They essentially rent it to pour all the detritus of Hillsfar and Ulash down this great hole that's lined with sort of ruby teeth sticking out of it. That's all going towards feeding a Moander avatar, whether they know it or not. So eventually you could expect to see this great big rolling mound of compost coming towards a city. Although Moander's not necessarily stupid, he's not going to just kill all of his worshippers like Gornador might, strike them dumb. There is a more humanoid aspect there, and I think in that respect, you have to wonder what Moander was before he became a deity. Almost all of the deities are conceptualized either from a mortal standpoint or they have relationships with someone. Every single deity has allies or enemies, for the most part, minus just about Cyric, who has pretty much zero allies, although that's an occasional thing. Moander never has allies. Because even the evil deities, even the evil priesthoods, know that if the seeds of Moander take a grip, then there's not going to be anyone left standing. No one to rule, no one to subjugate, no one to torment. Moander isn't about that. He is just about consuming Faerun, and then just laying back and enjoying. Not even enjoying, just laying back, going back to sleep, going back to rotting, going back to stinking. I really enjoy both of these deities, and I think you can form antagonists out of both groups as well, because again, you've got the divides in the Church of Shanthi, but you could potentially form alliances with both of them as well, just briefly. The Church of Moander is a very good tool to send against another evil priesthood, because they really don't care much for who they corrupt, who they piss off, who they turn to the worship of their master. They really don't mind who they are despoiling, and it's not through a sadism, it's just that they don't care. They're so committed to their somewhat alien god and his rather solipsistic aims, shall we say, that they will go around poisoning and corrupting absolutely anyone they like. And you could very well run a game where someone gets poisoned by one of these things, an NPC that the player characters know, or indeed one of the player characters, and try and find a cure for it. In the book it says a cure disease spell will deal with it, but have it be a little more complicated than that. Have it maybe be an advanced seedling of Moander. Now, come the current edition of the Forgotten Realms, Chauntea is still there, is still extant, but Moander is no longer. He was, as I say, destroyed by Find a Wyvern Spur, and the worship of Moander, which largely didn't translate to Finder because they were mostly mad and utterly obnoxious and evil, and what Finder is not, have often gone to Lolth, because Lolth, the drow goddess, impersonates Moander. Moander's worship was centred in Ulash, which is surrounded by wild elves, and because wild elves are very unlikely, even when evil, to worship a drow goddess, they would sometimes gravitate towards Moander, and therefore Lolth has subsumed his personality. Unlikely in the current edition, although I understand in 5th edition, the Player's Handbook of which came out, I think, yesterday, at the time of recording, I think pretty much every Forgotten Realms god to ever have existed is listed, and Moander may well be among them. But he's one of the least likely to be resurrected, just seeing as Lolth has done a perfectly good job of subsuming his portfolio. I imagine Moander would see some irony in that if he was capable of it. Anyway, I hope the two of those have given you food for thought, healthy food and rotten, and I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. And if there's any Forgotten Realms subjects you want me to cover, then by all means ask below, and I may well do it. I won't guarantee it. It's not like my vampire things where I'm going to do a constant thing. But I enjoy revisiting D&D settings every now and then. Thank you very much for watching.